Hi, Michael from Killarney here. Today, I'm going to show you how to change the wheel bearings on your trailer. So here's some of the stuff we're going to need. We need sockets to take the wheel off. We need these tools, wheel bearings, some grease, hammer, shifter and a pair of pliers, some rags. We're also going to need a pin punch, so we'll grab that in a minute. But to start with, let's get the wheel off. So just loosen the nuts before you jack the car up, jack the trailer up. So loosen all the nuts. That's done. Now we'll get the jack and we'll jack the trailer up and get the wheel off. Now we've got our wheel jacked up off the ground. Get our jack stand, put that under here so then we can work on the trailer safely without fear of getting squashed. So just place that under the trailer, put it up. Now I've got that, we'll just let the jack down onto the stand. We'll leave the jack there because later on we're just going to we'll have to get it off the stand. But for now that'll keep us safe whilst we work on the trailer bearing. So next let's get this wheel off. There we go, we've got our wheel off. Put that to the side. Alright, next we're going to get our wheel off. As you can see here, the dust cap's fallen off this bearing some time ago, and that's allowed dust, dirt and water to get in here. So sometimes when you've got a wheel bearing that's still intact, like the rear one, when you open that one up, you usually expect the wheel bearing to be in good condition, and you're only going to need to repack the grease and put it back together. But in this case, I expect this wheel bearing to be ruined, and that's why I got a new kit with a new wheel bearing, new seal, and new races. So let's get to getting this apart. Usually we pull the dust cap off, but that's already gone, lost on the highway somewhere. Take our split pin out. I'm going to take the nut off. Lay that to the side. Now that outer race is slightly stuck on the wheel bearing, so we're going to need to give it a bit of a tap, help loosen that up. So I'm tapping and I'm pulling on it at the same time to help get it off. Alright, so we just want to loosen this outer race, get this wheel bearing free and let it come off. So I've tapped it in. a slow process. Tap it in, tap it out, get loose, because the water and dirt's been allowed to get into this bearing. It's made it a bit harder to get off than normal. We will get there. So we've gone and got a bit of cardboard so that we don't make a mess of our concrete. There we go. So we've got the wheel off, no worries. Here's our brake drum. This is our bearing in here. This is our outer bearing. As expected, this outer bearing is all rusty. This outer bearing's had it. So, we've turned our hub over, and we just need to put our pin punch in, and we're going to tap out this bearing. One side, other side, no worries. Keep a rag handy to clean up as you go. You don't want to have mess everywhere. We've tapped out the bearing, and here's our old bearing. So we need to clean the grease out of here, because we're going to repack the grease. Use your finger, gently slide it around in there, get it out of that old contaminated grease. Give that a bit more of a clean up. This rag's had it, so put that to the side, grab another clean rag. Now one important part to consider is you don't want to be getting grease and oil in your brake drum, because if you get grease and oil all over that, when you go to use the brakes, they're not going to work because the grease will be it'll make it slippery, and it's not supposed to be slippery, it's supposed to grip for your brakes. So we'll give this race a bit more of a clean up. Then we're going to use the pin punch to drive these races out. So this is a bearing cone. The cone has a race that it runs on. And we need to get those out because we're going to replace those because they're a matched pair. This bearing's rusty, not supposed to be rusty, and I can see it's also a bit loose. So we're going to replace both parts of that. So we've got our bearings. We need to get in here, and I've got my pin punch, and I can feel the edge of the bearing lip. And I'm going to drive these out. Bit one side, bit the other side, repeat, repeat, repeat. See how it's coming out? Now I've just got to tap it the last little bit. Hello, came out. Beauty. So this is what I'm referring to with the damage to these races that cause the bearings to fail. See all those marks on there? Those marks are where the bearings have rusted onto the race, and then if we were to continue to tow this trailer with bearings like that, this bearing will self-destruct. Alright, so we're going to clean, now that we've got the two races out, one inner and one outer, we're going to clean, and I'm using the rag to clean out in here. Be careful not to just stick your fingers in here without a rag protecting them, because these edges here, they're very sharp, and they'll cut your finger really easily. So just use the rag, clean this up, nice and clean. You can spray a little bit of degreaser in there, but just be wary. You need to be careful not to spray and get oil and grease on the outside of the drum. If for some reason you do get some grease or oil on this drum, get a can of brake clean and clean the oil off before you put it all back together. Because if you put this together and it's got petrol or kerosene or something on the drum, the brakes just won't work anymore. So it's important to keep things nice and clean. So we'll put that to the side. That's ready for the new bearings to go in. So we'll continue our clean up. Clean the spindle. Beautiful. Here's an inner grease seal up against the hub. That helps keep the grease from the bearings flinging out and getting onto your shoes. So we're going to need a screwdriver to pop this off of here. So quickly go grab a screwdriver and we'll get into that. Right, it's good to keep a good supply of rags on hand because you're going to make a fair bit of grease and mess and we need to clean up as we go. So we're going to pry this seal off. We just top it off. Too easy. And that's done. We'll put that all our discarded products aside and just give that one more bit of a clean up. And then we'll be ready to start the reinstallment phase. So we've got our hub. It's nice and clean. We've got our bearing kit. Let's open that up. Inner race. Outer bearing. New seal. And new split pin. We'll just put the split pin to the side with our castle nut and we'll get that later. Right, so I'll put our race in. This is the inner race, and this is the cone. We want to have the thin side of the cone facing out because the bearing needs to go into this and nest into the other one. So we just gently tap this in. You don't have to work it in because if you go to pound too hard on one side, the bearing will try to jump out of the track like that. So it's a little bit of tapping, work your way around, tap, 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 tap. And we tap that in. Now we've got the race down flush. We need to just tap it in further so it goes all the way home to the bottom of the track. So just repeat the process. One side, the other side. Alright, well that bearing's all completely installed now. I can feel that it's home, but I can also see that the bearing race is up against the casting of the bearing of the wheel hub. So I can see that we've successfully installed this inner race. Now let's do the outer race. So we've got that, same again. You've got the cone, you want the thin side of the cup facing out. See how that's the thick side and that's the thin side? We want to have the thin side facing out when we tap it in. Work this one in gently, round and round and round, side to side. Now that's flush, we've got to drive it the rest of the way home with a pin punch. side to side, repeat. Let's get a shot of above, okay, because they're not probably going to see what's going on there from the 90 degrees. So we drive this race in, one side, the other side, the other side. I can hear that's finished and it's gone all the way home now. So we'll just give it a couple more taps, make sure it's fully seated. Alright, that's good. What we're going to do next is we need to pack the wheel bearings. Now this is a very important stage, and it's very simple. Just got to follow a bit of a procedure. Alright, so what we need to do next is pack the wheel bearings. We've got our helpful chickens here. They're supervising the work and being a bit free range. Right, so now we need to pack the wheel bearing. Straightforward enough procedure. We just need to make sure it's fully packed. So we got our bearing like this. We're going to get a bit of grease, put it in the palm of your hand like that. And then what we're looking for is we're going to push the grease from the back of the wheel bearing, so the fat side, to the skinny side, and we're going to force that through. And what we're looking for, to know that we've got it all the way through, is we'll see little sausages start to come out, little worms of grease. See the 3 there? We push those through, and then we repeat the process all the way around the entire wheel bearing, because this packs the grease inside the bearing. And if you don't pack the grease in, as soon as you put this wheel bearing on, like say you just smeared the grease on the surface like this, that's not going to be good enough. There's going to be no grease inside your wheel bearing, and then won't take long. This thing will melt and your wheel bearing will seize, and the whole tire could fall off your trailer. So we continue the process round and round and round, squeezing it through till we see those little worms of grease push through the wheel bearing. And as you see, some of the grease builds up in the center. Slap that back on your hand, repeat, rotate the bearing a smidgen, repeat. Again. Alright, that's perfect, and I can feel that the bearing grease is in there, and as I push it through, I can see that every time I push more through, a little tiny bit of a worm of grease pops up. So then that's fully packed. Beautiful. Right, we've got a nice clean bit of cardboard here. We're going to lay that to the side. Then we'll get the inner bearing. Let's take care of putting the grease in there. Let's get started. A little bit more grease on the inside of your hand. Push it through from your palm of your hand. We see the little worms coming through there. Go around, and I'm just twisting my fingers a little bit. Get all greasy and messy. That's why you got to have a really good supply of rags to take care of cleaning up your hands and the whole job. Alright, this bearing's now fully packed. I can see, and I've worked my way around twice, so I know all the grease is in there. I'll lay that to the side as well. Alright, next phase. We've got our grease on our hands. Cool. Next thing we need to do is we need to fill the inner race of the wheel bearing hub. So we get some grease on the fingers, wipe it in here. We need to go all the way around and fill. There's a little groove in here. We need to fill that all the way around. All the way around, and we smooth that off so it's all full. Now I'll put a bit of grease all around the inner race here, and that's ready to put together. So I'll clean my hands off. I don't want to be spreading any more grease around willy-nilly. A couple rags later, and my hands are acceptable again. So we'll get this and we'll wipe the edge of this wheel bearing hub. Because again, we've got to be careful we don't smear this grease around everywhere. If we smear the grease around everywhere, our brakes aren't going to work, and that's not going to be super good for this trailer. So we put our bearing in, important to watch that basically you've got a cone and you've got a cone going the reverse direction in the wheel bearing hub. Put the cone skinny side down and that'll go straight in perfect. I'm going to wipe off a little bit of that excess grease. Alright, so we'll tap our wheel hub seal. This is a race where the wheel hub seal goes into. We'll just tap that into place, gently tap it around. Nice and even. That's tapped all the way in. Now with this is our our seal, right? What we want to do is just get a little bit of grease and put a little bit of grease on the inside lip of this. Don't want to go overboard, just enough so it's greased a smidge. And then this outer seal as well, we want to seal that too. Nice, and that's going to keep everything not binding up. A little bit more here, just a bit, cool. Then we just push that in, too easy. Now we'll wipe this down, because this is now ready to assemble. Now we're going to put this on the trailer. Pick it up, gently guide that on. Guided that in place. Wonderful. So, hub's back installed. Next thing we need to do, we need to install the outer bearing. So we've got our bearing here, super duper. Same again. It's a cone. We want to have the small side of the cone, and we'll push that onto the actual shaft. Wipe off a little bit of the excess grease. We're just going to tap this into place. Tap, 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 tap. There we go. Wonderful. That's in there nicely. So I'm just cleaning up this washer, getting all the dirt and grime off of it, ready to go back on to my bearing. Put this on. Boom. Now we got our nut. Same again, give this a bit of a clean up because she's been out in the elements a bit. When everything is nice and clean, we put it back together. If the mood strikes you and you've got a bit of kerosene or petrol around, give this a bit of a good scrub with that. Alright, so we're ready to put the nut back on. So this is an important phase of resetting your wheel bearings. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to preload this wheel bearing with a little bit of tension. We've got the wheel bearing. I can feel that's tight. No worries. So we're going to put it on tight. We're going to spin it a bit. Then a bit more, and I'm going to make that tighter. Two reasons we're going to do this is one, to make sure that our bearings are seated and then not going to work our way loose. So we preload and we're making this quite tight. I want to do this. I can feel the wheel bearing itself getting a bit firmer. I can feel it biting on the hub. Alright, we preload our bearing. I can feel that the pressure on the wheel bearings is now starting to slow the hub. That's no longer freewheeling. But we don't want to leave it that tight, because that'll overheat and that'll be a disaster. So we loosen that off. We spin our hub a little bit, free it up, and basically the correct loading of this wheel bearing, we need to have just the amount, just nice and tight. So I've loose. Oh, that's touching, and a little bit more than the touching part. So this wheel, we've got a split pin that goes in vertical. So what we're going to do is we've got our tight, that's tight. We're going to go to the next available hole, which is here. There's not too much pressure on our bearing. Yeah, double check. Beautiful. So we'll stop it there. Our castle nut, we put our split pin in. That's going to keep that from working its way loose with any vibrations. Alright, we've put our split pin in our castle nut. Now we've just got to arrange this. So we get our split pin and we fold this up like that. Give it a little tap, make it nice and flush. This lower pin, we're going to need to trim this off. Probably 5 or so mil past the nut. Cut that off with your pliers. Just give it a tap and fold it up against the castle nut. And we're done. That's beautiful. What we're going to need to do is, we don't have one, we're going to have to race. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to race up to the trailer shop and get a cap. We need to get one of these dust caps like that's on that rear wheel. We're going to go grab a dust cap and put that on there so this wheel bearing lasts. So we'll just rev up the shop and we'll grab that, and then we'll come back and we'll finish this off and put the wheel back on. Alright, so we've got our new cap. That goes on here to protect the bearing. So what we're going to do is we'll put a bit of grease in here. Don't fill it up all the way to the top, but you need to put probably about half full of grease. Put that around there. Give yourself a bit of a clean up. Get your hammer. These things are supposed to be tight, right? But you don't want to cave in the face of this cap. So you sort of get it started, then use your punch and tap this cap in around the edges. Resist the temptation to just pound the cap at the end, because if you do that, you'll cave the cap in, then the cap will run on the end of the nut, and that will just wear through in a few kilometers. So just tap it in. You can see this is going in nicely. That's nice and tight, so that's not going to fall off. Still got a little tiny bit to go, and that's done. Let's give it a couple taps around the edges, make sure it's seated all the way home, and we're finished. We'll pull our tools over to the side, cap our grease stub, move our pile of dirty rags out of the road. We're going to get the wheel ready to put back on. Wheels on, grab the wheel nuts. Just do the nuts up. With these, do these diagonal. I've just got my foot on down here to stop the wheel from spinning, as I just do these up snug. Right, now we're ready to put this off the jack stand. Alright, we'll just jack that up. Take our jack stand out. Let it off the jack. Down. Final thing we need to do, now we put it back on the ground, we just need to tighten up these wheel nuts. Go diagonal. Then we've gone all the way around, so just go around one time, make sure they're all nice and tight. And that's done. Now we just pack up our tools and we're done. Alright, well that's changing a wheel bearing on a trailer. Not too difficult a job, just follow the steps and you'll have good success. Alright, thanks for watching my video. If you've liked it, give it a share and give it a like. Thank you.